Here at the Historical Society, we believe in students interacting with history in very real ways. So this week, students from Frankfort Christian Academy have been looking at collections and at the Historical Society upstairs, behind the scenes. They've looked at shoes and clothing, the Churchill Weavers collection, hats. They've spent a great deal of time in our exhibits, studying and preparing. And throughout the week, they have been creating their own fashions that are inspired by the history that they have learned. On the walls here, you'll see drawings and preparations throughout the week, and some pieces that they've created here, and they will be showing off a few other pieces that they've created as well. Everything that you're going to see, including the script, has been prepared by the students of Frankfort Christian Academy. So, without further ado, CatWalk through history.
Then we began to make designs of our own, and we even consulted a professional for advice. We made sketches and designs and designed on mannequins. Later we began to conduct an outfit. We used linen, hot glue, and designs of our own to create a wearable outfit from our sketches.
At the beginning of the week, we had a challenge on the mannequins, where we designed from outfits. We interviewed the groups about the pieces, and this is what they said. The first team, Suzette and Olivia. The inspiration for our outfit was the Victorian era dresses and the bustle.
A modern take on the bustle, what do you imagine?
We chose the materials they used because they were simple and modern. They came up with the idea for this outfit because they were inspired by the bustle. So they created their own modern version.
The second team was Suzette and Trinity and Valencia. Their inspiration was a simple ballroom gown. They chose the fabrics because they were simple and a solid color. And the idea that they had just kind of came up in their mind as they chose the materials.
The third team, Samantha, Evelyn, and Hudson. They found the inspiration for the outfit in the 50s. They chose the materials that they used to add texture and a mixture of patterns. They came up with the idea for this outfit because the skirt really gave them the thought of the 50s.
And then finally, we had two individuals create pieces. To my right here is a piece that was created by Evelyn. She was inspired by Native American traditions of using the things that they could have accessible to them and our modern tendencies towards organics. So she believed that the fabric in her line would be dyed by grasses and things like that, natural colors, and she really wanted to play with natural fibers like burlap to show layers. This is Evelyn's piece. And over here we have Samantha. Samantha created a simple piece that she thought would be nice for formal wear, something you could wear to church or to work. She created the design completely from her own imagination. Now you've already seen them in some of the costumes that we have for students to wear, but they wanted to share a little bit of the information that they've learned on some of the costumes and how things have changed a little bit through the years. So if you don't mind, we're going to take you through a little walk through history. So up first we have Hudson. Hudson is wearing a gown that would be appropriate for about to the middle 1800s. 1850s. The line's very simple. She would be wearing a hoop skirt underneath, but for obvious reasons, it's a little hard for us to work that in with changes and such. The lines are very simple and lots of fabric and blousey material. Thank you, Leslie. Up next, who do we have? We have Malia and, oh my gosh, I draw one place. Valencia, thank you. Valencia and Malia. I've only called them 100 names this week. They are wearing clothing that's appropriate for the Regency era. In Kentucky, we have a few gowns like this, especially that were worn during Lafayette's visit to Frankfort. We also did some research several years ago and discovered that Thomas Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln's father, purchased several yards of linen that we believe was used to make the gown for his beautiful wife before they were wed. We think it probably would have been along this similar type of time period and design. The Regency era gowns with Valencia and Malia. Up next is Evelyn with transitional period there in the early 1800s as well. You can see the lines are beginning to change as they move from the Regency towards the wider antebellum gowns. Coming apart in the back there, but that's okay. We can see that the sleeves we're starting to cover much more of the body at this point, and she would have had several crinolines under as well to maintain the proper shape. Thank you, Evelyn. Who's next? Up next we have Suzette. Suzette is wearing a gown or a simple dress that would have been made during the 1930s, during the Depression era. The fabric for this would have been gathered from feed sacks. And the pattern for this would have been something that they could have ordered from a magazine. The woman would have made it herself. Completely different from just a few years before when couture fashion would have been more accessible. At this point, finances and such would have determined that the woman would have wanted to make more of her own clothing. Thank you, Suzette. And up next we have Samantha wearing a beautiful antebellum gown as well. Again, this would have a hoop skirt, but you can see the fullness of the sleeves and an attempt to try to accentuate the fullness of the skirt. We are surrounded right now by absolute perfect examples of accurate antebellum clothing. So if you really want to know what antebellum women were wearing and Civil War women, you're surrounded by great examples right here. Thank you. And up last we have Kennedy. Kennedy's wearing a gown that would be appropriate during the 1950s, a nice Easter dress. In Louisville, Kentucky, there was an event that happened in the mid-1950s where African Americans were not allowed to try on clothing in Louisville dress stores. So they decided to protest during the Nothing New for Easter protest. They did not buy new Easter clothing so that they could change the store's habits of not allowing African Americans to try on clothing. It didn't quite work, so they decided they were going to protest Derby. That changed the business forever. African Americans from then on were able to try on clothing in the stores. Thank you, Kennedy. Okay. That brings to the close the end of our historical pieces and examples from our costume collection for students. Up next, you're going to see items that the students have actually designed completely by themselves. We spoke in the middle of the week with a professional designer from New York, and he told us that when he's designing pieces, he creates examples completely out of muslin so that his customers can see the shape and design that he's going for before he commits to using the proper fabric. So what you're going to see is costume samples completely made out of muslin, completely handmade by the students themselves. We only had about 2 days to do it in the process of all the other things we were doing. So they use very simple materials, hot glue, a lot of hot glue. But I think you'll be surprised at the shapes and the inspiration that they found. Up first we have Hudson. Hudson is inspired by the 80s and 90s. With inspiration from hippies in the 60s. The name of her fashion line is Real Life Fashion, or Pretty Odd. She's created a skater skirt with a top set. The most difficult for her was getting it to look right, especially the seams. And if you've ever made your own clothing, you know how difficult that can be. And the placing where the sides meet. She feels like teenagers will probably buy this. Thank you very much. Up next we have Malia. Malia's historical inspiration comes from the pleats that are reminiscent from some Victorian couture fashion, especially the corsets and things that we've looked at. The name of her fashion line was M.W. Couture, with the pleat summer outfit that you see here, accentuated very subtly with some shells. She believes that the pleats and getting those accurate was the most difficult part, and teenagers should probably be the market for her line. Thank you, Malia. Up next is Evelyn. Evelyn was inspired directly by World War II women's pantsuit that is on display. If you go into the World War section, you'll see a green women's pantsuit that looks very similar to this. However, Evelyn updated it by making this, the name of this fashion, 21st Pilot. This is inspiration directly from a band that is current today called 21 Pilots. It also reflects the women's movement of being engaged in the military and 21st century. So there's a lot happening here. The most difficult part for her was making the top and all of the different lines because of the different cuts and seams. She feels like teenagers for a party or for fall would wear this, or just lazy people who don't know how to put an outfit together. Thank you. I encourage you to go take a look at her inspirational piece because the similarities are striking, but she's updated the lines. Up next we have Valencia. Valencia really enjoyed the 1960s hippie colors and fun outfits, but she's also taken some inspiration, as you can see, from some of the gowns in the early 1900s, 1910 and 20. In fact, on the other side of this car, on the other side of the wall, is a skirt that directly influenced her choice here. Valencia's name of her fashion line is Vows of New York. The line is full of bold looks inspired by hippie colors, freedom and fun. The piece that she's showing today is a long skirt with a V-slit front with ruffles and a strapless top. The most difficult part for her was folding all the seams, getting them right, and figuring out what kind of look she wanted to do in the first place. If she had a whole line, she would have lots of different styles for everyone. Thank you. Up next we have Suzette. Suzette's inspired by the 1960s tie-dye looks. She went with a very simple A-frame skirt. Suzette's fashion freedom, she calls it. My piece will, for the show, is a simple A-line skirt, she says. Getting the seams straight and getting the pieces correctly sized was difficult for her, and she's added a little bit of decorative color to give you an idea of how she might play with color in her piece. She feels that young, hip teens would love the fashion she's designed. Thank you. Next we have Samantha. Samantha has a formal Victorian look. Inspired her, and so she's created Sammy's formal attire. She was inspired by some of the capes and things that we have seen this week and some of the ponchos, and so she created something that she thought would be adaptable. The bottom is removable and can be worn during the winter or taken off during the summer for a lighter look. She feels she would use heavier fabrics, like really heavy wools and heavier, denser fabrics. The most difficult part for her was getting the line straight and getting those buttons lined up. She feels like most people that might attend weddings or formal events might enjoy her capes. Thank you, Samantha. And up last is Kennedy. Kennedy's inspiration was from the mid-1900s with dresses on display in our museum. You can see from the extremely long tail that she has here that she was really inspired by that look. She calls it the any party dress. It can go to any party. And the pieces for the show are just a simple top that has buttons down the front with a long flowing skirt with matching buttons. The most difficult part for her was attaching all the buttons and getting those seams right. Anyone attending a formal event would be lucky to wear Kennedy's style. Thanks, Kennedy.